Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that the most consequential shift in global power right now isn't happening in the chaotic halls of Washington, the boardrooms of Beijing, or the war rooms of Moscow, but rather in the quiet, snow-swept capitals of the North? And what if the nation stepping up to anchor this fractured, unpredictable world wasn't a traditional military superpower, but a stable, democratic middle power that the world has long taken for granted? Before we unpack exactly how this massive geopolitical shift is happening, if you want to stay ahead of the curve on global politics and changing world orders, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. It really helps the channel grow, and you won't want to miss what we cover next. Let's be honest with ourselves for a minute. We are living through a profound realignment of the global order. For decades, the world operated under a relatively predictable set of rules. You knew who the superpowers were, you knew where the security umbrellas extended, and you knew exactly how global trade was supposed to flow. But today, those certainties are evaporating right in front of us. Alliances that took half a century to build are being stress-tested to their absolute breaking points. Global trade is under immense, crushing strain. Geopolitical tensions are rising to levels not seen since the height of the Cold War. In this climate of fear and unpredictability, nations are desperately searching for something that has suddenly become the most valuable currency on the international stage: reliability. And that brings me to something remarkable that just happened in Oslo, Norway. It was a moment that slipped past the sensationalist headlines, but for those paying attention to the tectonic plates of global geopolitics, it was a thunderclap. Standing beside the Norwegian Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney received something that says everything about the specific moment Canada is living through right now. He received unprecedented, highly public praise from a major European leader. These were not just the polite, scripted, diplomatic words exchanged during routine photo opportunities. This was a profound recognition that Canada, under Carney's leadership, is rapidly evolving into a central pillar of global stability. To really grasp the gravity of this, consider what happened during that press conference. The Norwegian Prime Minister looked at his Canadian counterpart and made a statement that essentially redefined the transatlantic relationship. He noted the genuine, palpable boost in relations across the Atlantic, going so far as to call Canada an honorary Nordic nation. If you understand the Nordic political mindset, a culture that prizes intense pragmatism, unwavering democratic institutions, high social trust, and quiet, hyper-competent governance, you know that folding Canada into that exclusive ideological family is a massive geopolitical signal. When he mentioned that his Nordic colleagues were happily flying into Oslo on a Sunday morning just to sit down for a session with Carney, it told the whole story. Global leaders do not give up their Sunday mornings for ceremonial pleasantries. They do it because there is real, urgent, and positive work to be done. Now let's talk about the elephant in the global room, the stark geopolitical contrast that is currently defining the Western world. The contrast could not possibly be sharper. On one side, you have the United States under Donald Trump. Regardless of one's domestic political leanings, the objective reality on the international stage is that the current American administration has embraced chaos as a negotiating tactic. The U.S. is actively shaking the foundations of historic alliances, threatening the withdrawal of defense commitments, launching aggressive trade wars against its closest friends, and injecting massive, terrifying uncertainty into global markets. The traditional guarantor of the free world has become its most unpredictable wildcard. Faced with this American volatility, you have Mark Carney positioning Canada as the ultimate counter-narrative. Canada is stepping into the spotlight not as a loud, bellicose disruptor, but as something entirely different and far more necessary: a reliable partner, an unshakable democracy, and increasingly, a global energy and security powerhouse. In a world on fire, Canada is offering the world a firebreak. But how do they actually do it? Well, look at the meeting between Carney and Norway's Prime Minister. This wasn't merely ceremonial, it was a deeply strategic alignment between two unique global players. Look at a map and consider the economic profiles of both nations. Norway is one of the world's most critical energy exporters, a sovereign wealth giant, and a central NATO ally guarding the highly sensitive Arctic region against Russian expansionism. Canada is its mirror image across the Atlantic. Together, these two countries sit on some of the largest, most strategically vital, and most reliable energy resources on the planet. Think about the timing here. At a time when global energy markets are uniquely vulnerable, threatened by war in Eastern Europe, instability in the Middle East, and unpredictable export policies from the United States, the resources controlled by Oslo and Ottawa matter more than they have in a generation. During his time at the podium, Carney made a definitive statement of intent. He made it crystal clear that Canada intends to play a major, proactive role in stabilizing these jittery global energy markets. But the method matters just as much as the promise. Canada will not achieve this through the reckless transactional policies or short-term political whims that have become the hallmark of Donald Trump's Washington. Instead, Canada will stabilize the world through reliable, uninterrupted production, through the strength of stable democratic institutions, and through highly responsible, long-term capital investment. Let me tell you, this message landed with incredible weight in Europe. It landed differently compared to the chaotic, threatening noise constantly emanating from Washington, because while the United States has frequently resorted to threatening its own allies with trade punishments and tariffs to force compliance, Canada is presenting itself as a partner that the world can actually bet its economic future on. Carney broke down the mechanics of this reliability in a way everyone could understand, using the framework of the International Energy Agency. He explained that major exporters of oil like Canada and Norway play a fundamentally different role than importing nations. Importing nations are mandated to hold massive strategic reserves to buffer against global shocks. Exporters like Canada don't need to hold those reserves because they are the buffer. As Carney stated, Canada is providing the literal fuel that keeps the global economic engine running, and they are doing so as a safe, low-risk, low-cost, and increasingly low-carbon exporter. This is exactly what global leaders and multinational investors are starting to recognize with striking clarity. Canada is not just a participant in the global economy. It is one of the most resource-rich territories on Earth. The country holds some of the world's largest proven oil reserves. It has massive, highly scalable natural gas capacity. Crucially, it sits on a treasure trove of the critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, that are absolutely essential for the next generation of modern technology and the global green transition. Beyond that, it possesses vast, untapped energy potential in the high Arctic and offshore regions. But let's be clear, having resources is simply not enough. Venezuela has resources. Russia has resources. What separates Canada from other major energy producers is the intangible premium that investors and allied governments value above all else: political stability, an unyielding commitment to the rule of law, and transparent, reliable democratic governance. When you buy energy or critical minerals from Canada, you are not funding a dictator's war machine, nor are you subjecting your supply chains to the arbitrary whims of an autocrat. Canada's energy sector is no longer just about generating export revenue. It has evolved into a strategic geopolitical tool, providing a bedrock of stability to a world that has lost up to 15% of its reliable oil buffer and potentially 20% of its natural gas flow. But to truly grasp the magnitude of what's happening, let's pause for a moment and look at the map again. But this time, don't look at it from east to west. Look at it from the top down. Look at the Arctic. For generations, the high north was an afterthought, a frozen, impassable frontier that served as a natural, impenetrable shield for North America and Northern Europe. But that shield is melting, both literally and geopolitically. The Arctic is rapidly becoming the most fiercely contested, high-stakes real estate on the planet. As the polar ice recedes, we are witnessing the opening of legendary waterways like the Northwest Passage. This isn't just about shaving a few days off commercial shipping times. It is about the fundamental control of the roof of the world. And make no mistake, our adversaries are already making their moves. Look at what is happening right now. Russia has spent the last decade aggressively remilitarizing its vast northern coastline. They are reopening abandoned Soviet-era military bases, deploying advanced hypersonic missile systems, and launching fleets of nuclear-powered icebreakers. Meanwhile, China, a nation situated thousands of miles away from the Arctic Circle, has audaciously declared itself a near-Arctic state. Beijing is systematically eyeing the region's massive untapped resource deposits and attempting to buy up critical infrastructure in the north. They are playing a long, calculated, and highly aggressive game. This is exactly where the Canadian-Nordic alliance transcends economics and becomes a matter of hard, unavoidable national security. During the Cold War, the United States was the unquestioned dominant shield of the Northern Hemisphere. The American military umbrella was absolute. But today, with Washington deeply distracted by internal political warfare, increasingly isolationist in its rhetoric, and with its current leadership openly treating NATO commitments like conditional business contracts, the responsibility to secure the northern flank of the free world is fundamentally shifting. This is why Prime Minister Carney's presence in Oslo alongside Prime Minister Sture carries such profound weight. When Canada and Norway stand shoulder to shoulder, they aren't just discussing the export of liquefied natural gas or the mining of lithium. They are actively coordinating the defense of NATO's most vulnerable frontier. By tightly linking Canada's immense northern geography and growing defense investments with Norway's strategic frontline position and maritime expertise, these two nations are effectively forming a unified, impenetrable wall across the Arctic. They are sending a deafening, unambiguous message to both Moscow and Beijing. The High North is not a power vacuum waiting to be filled. It is not up for grabs. It is sovereign, democratic territory, defended by nations that possess both the economic muscle and the political will to hold the line. For decades, critics have argued that Canada has enjoyed a free ride on American security, but what we are witnessing now is the total inversion of that dynamic. Canada is no longer just a passenger on the geopolitical train. It is moving into the driver's seat in the north. They are recognizing that true sovereignty requires more than just planting a flag in the snow. It requires persistent presence, advanced technology, and unbreakable alliances with nations that share your exact longitude of values. I'm really curious to hear your take on this. Do you think Canada has the military and economic capacity to actually hold the line in the Arctic without leaning entirely on the U.S.? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a debate going. I read every single one. Now, you might be thinking, what about the pushback at home? Because we all know the path to global leadership is never without domestic friction. And sure enough, not everyone at the press conference in Oslo was there to sing the Prime Minister's praises. In a moment of high tension, a reporter attempted to publicly challenge Carney's domestic record. She threw down the gauntlet, suggesting that his economic leadership had failed to deliver tangible results for everyday Canadians, citing specific job losses in February and questioning his ability to handle U.S. tariffs. It was a deliberate attempt to puncture the narrative of Canadian strength on foreign soil. But Carney's response was an absolute masterclass in political communication. He did not deflect. He did not offer empty political rhetoric or attack the press. Instead, he reached into his arsenal and unleashed cold, hard data. He methodically dismantled the premise of the question with numbers that no one could argue with. Instead of dodging, he laid out the reality of job creation. Since he took office, Canada had created a net total of 84,000 jobs. To put that in devastating perspective, he casually noted that the United States, an economy roughly 10 times the size of Canada's, had created a meager 6,000 jobs over that exact same period. But he didn't stop at job volume. He moved to job quality and the cost of living. He pointed out that every single month, wages in Canada have grown faster than the rate of inflation, with the most recent month showing wage growth above 4%. Yes, the cost of living had risen, a global phenomenon, but Canadians were mathematically getting ahead of it. Furthermore, he didn't just talk about paychecks. He pivoted to the physical transformation of the country. He highlighted major infrastructure and energy projects that are currently breaking ground and moving forward across the continent. From massive pipeline developments and uranium extraction projects to strategic infrastructure initiatives expanding into Canada's deep north, he painted a picture of a nation physically expanding its economic capacity. Why does this exchange matter? Because it highlights a fundamental truth of geopolitics. Global leadership cannot be built on empty slogans. and you cannot project strength abroad if you are weak and decaying at home. Canada's strategy under Carney is not just about delivering eloquent speeches at European summits. It is about the rigorous, unglamorous work of building real, undeniable economic capacity within its own borders. That domestic industrial and economic strength is the very foundation that allows the Canadian Prime Minister to stand in a foreign capital and speak with genuine authority. But if you want to know where this is truly heading, I want to draw your attention to perhaps the most revealing and consequential moment of the entire press conference, which came near the very end. A Norwegian journalist stepped up and asked the question that has been quietly keeping European leaders awake at night. With the United States taking increasingly aggressive, punitive trade actions against its own historic allies, was it time for nations like Canada and European countries to bypass Washington and drastically deepen their cooperation with each other? It was the ultimate trap. The question was a direct, albeit polite, reference to the unreliability of the current American administration. The bait was dangling right in front of Carney, an easy opportunity to score cheap political points by attacking Donald Trump on European soil. Carney's answer, however, was brilliant in its strategic restraint. He did not take the bait. He didn't launch a direct rhetorical strike against the White House. Instead, he completely reframed the geopolitical paradigm. He stated that increasing cooperation between democratic nations, whether it be Canada and Norway, Canada and the EFTA countries, or Canada and the European Union, is not merely a defensive reaction to American unpredictability. It is not just a backup plan. Deepening these alliances makes absolute strategic sense regardless of who sits in the Oval Office. He reminded the room that these are like-minded nations. They possess highly complementary economies. They share a fundamental belief in strong labor codes, aggressive sustainability targets, and the necessity of building innovative, future-proof economies. Because they share these foundational values, deeper economic and security cooperation is not just possible, it is an urgent necessity. The underlying message was subtle, but I promise you, it was incredibly powerful. In a world where the United States is choosing to isolate itself, acting erratically and treating alliances like mafia protection rackets, the rest of the democratic world is not simply going to sit around and wait to be bullied. Canada, alongside its European allies, is actively building a resilient, overlapping network of cooperation. They are building a system of trade, energy security, and mutual defense that can stand on its own 2 feet, completely independent of Washington's mood swings. So, what does all of this mean for the future? What the world witnessed in Norway was so much more than a routine diplomatic check-in. It was a clear, unfiltered glimpse into the architecture of a changing global order. We are moving away from a unipolar world dominated by a single, benevolent superpower. We are entering an era where the heavy lifting of global stability will have to be done by highly capable, deeply serious middle powers. Canada is officially stepping forward to take on that burden. While other major powers are choosing the path of confrontation, isolationism, and zero-sum unpredictability, Canada is making a different choice. It is choosing the path of strategic cooperation, massive long-term investment, and steady, unflappable leadership. It is leveraging its unparalleled natural wealth, not to exploit its partners, but to underwrite the security of the free world. Ultimately, the standing of a nation is not measured by the volume of its threats, but by the weight of its commitments. In Oslo, Canada proved the weight of its commitments. And judging by the unprecedented praise coming from its European allies, the world isn't just starting to notice Canada's rise. It is fundamentally relying on it to keep the lights on and the future secure. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this deep dive valuable, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. What are your thoughts on Canada's new role on the world stage? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next one.